Something massive is happening across the world right now, yet barely anyone is talking about it. And in the long run, this shift could completely transform the way we all live. What I'm referring to is Digital ID. This government will make a new, free-of-charge Digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this parliament. Let me make that clear, you will not be allowed to work in the United Kingdom if you don't have a Digital ID. At first, it might seem unrelated to economics or finance, maybe even sound boring, but the truth is, this could be one of the most significant changes governments around the world are pushing right now. And interestingly, it's happening almost everywhere, all at once. In the United States, at least 25 states have already rolled out digital driver's licenses, meaning that now you can use your phone instead of your wallet when checking in for a flight, for example. Meanwhile, Europe passed a law last year that requires all EU member nations to introduce a national digital ID wallet by 2026. China launched its version this summer, connecting it to their social credit system. Countries such as South Korea, Singapore, Nigeria, and the United Arab Emirates have already adopted similar digital ID frameworks. Now, you might have heard about digital IDs before, but most people still don't really understand what they truly are, mainly because there's been almost no public debate or discussion. You won't hear about it in Congress, it's not trending on CNBC, and the majority of people probably don't even realize that this is actually happening. Here's what's interesting though, the United Nations has officially set a goal for legal identity for all by 2030. And the ones funding this initiative? The World Economic Forum and the World Bank. Both Europe and the United States are now turning these plans into law. In just the past decade, the number of countries adopting national digital ID systems has doubled. Today, over 100 countries either already have one or are in the process of creating one. At first glance, it sounds pretty great. Digital IDs promise to reduce fraud, simplify travel, and help give over 1 billion people their first ever official identity. But once you really understand how much control this system can give governments, it becomes shocking. When your entire identity becomes digital, whoever holds control over that ID, holds power over you. And when RFK Jr. called it turnkey totalitarianism, he wasn't exaggerating. This could lay the foundation for global surveillance over every single person on Earth. So in today's video, I'll break down exactly what a digital ID is, how it works, how it connects to your financial life, and most importantly, what you should be prepared for. So, let's dive in. Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Come for the finance, and stay for the digital IDs. Before we look at how governments plan to roll this out, let's first clarify what a digital ID actually is, because when most people hear the term, they imagine it's just a photo of your driver's license saved on your phone. And yes, in some ways, that's true, but it's also a lot more than that. A digital ID is a secure electronic form of identification that verifies your identity. It's usually built into an app on your smartphone, and inside that app is all your personal data, verified by a trusted source like a company or government authority. But here's where it differs from physical IDs. Digital IDs use biometric data, such as facial recognition or fingerprints, combined with cryptographic encryption, which makes them much harder to fake. Once your identity is verified, that digital ID becomes reusable, meaning you don't need to repeatedly show your passport or driver's license to multiple organizations or visit government offices. Instead, you can simply share only the specific piece of information required. For example, if a bar needs to verify you're over 21, your app can confirm that fact without revealing your birth date or ID number. On paper, it all sounds convenient, safer, more private, and harder to forge. But as you'll soon see, when that much power becomes centralized, a bigger question arises: what can they do with it? Governments and tech companies frame this as a secure and convenient innovation. But how it's already being used in some countries tells a completely different story. Let's take China as an example. Just this past summer, they rolled out their national digital ID app, but instead of being a simple digital upgrade of the physical ID, they linked it to their social credit system. That means their digital ID isn't just proof of identity, it's also tied to things like financial history, travel permissions, and even online activity. In other words, if the government disapproves of what you say online or what you buy, they can restrict your ability to travel, make purchases, or access certain public services. One journalist who had been sued for defamation discovered he'd been blacklisted only when he tried to buy a train ticket, and was told he was banned from traveling. If you refuse a government-mandated vaccine, sorry, you can't use public transport. Authorities can detect it instantly, send you a notification, and deduct money directly from your account, since China's main apps, WeChat and Alipay, are connected to their digital ID system. Reports have emerged of elderly citizens and workers being denied food and pensions because their fingerprint scanners stopped working. If the system fails to recognize you, you don't get food, as simple as that. These are real-world examples showing how powerful and dangerous a fully digital identity can be, and we're just scratching the surface. Across the European Union, they've already passed a law called eIDAS 2.0, which requires every EU member state to offer a national digital ID wallet by 2026. So within a year or two, every European citizen will have access to a single government-backed app that lets them log into banks, file taxes, and more, essentially a universal login for life. In the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Keir Starmer plans to make digital IDs mandatory for employment. We must be clear, you need a digital ID to work, because we have to stop illegal working. In the United States, a national system doesn't exist yet, but we're getting close. At least 25 states already have mobile driver's licenses, and 20 more are developing them. Major companies like Uber and Amazon have started accepting them too. Under the previous administration, President Biden even issued an executive order supporting federal adoption of digital IDs. Other countries are in different stages of development. Singapore has its own system called SingPass, already used by over 4.5 million people. South Korea launched a new app this year that completely replaces physical banking cards. Nigeria and the UAE are also rolling out their versions. The UAE Pass alone connects to over 5,000 services, from signing legal documents to paying utility bills. So the big question is, why now? Why are so many governments pushing digital IDs simultaneously? When you ask them, you won't hear words like control or surveillance. They'll say it's about convenience, security, and inclusion, and even fighting illegal immigration. So, for a moment, let's look at it from their point of view, the official narrative of why digital IDs are supposed to be a good thing. First, fraud prevention. Identity theft costs billions each year, and paper documents are easy to forge. Digital IDs use encryption and biometrics, making them much harder to fake or steal. Second, inclusion. Nearly 1 billion people worldwide still have no official ID. Without one, they can't vote, open bank accounts, or access basic benefits. Third, efficiency. Governments claim it'll save time and money by eliminating paperwork. No more waiting in line at the DMV, just log in and you're done. Estonia, for instance, runs 99% of public services digitally and saves about 2% of its GDP each year. Finally, interoperability. The EU says its digital wallet will let citizens travel, pay taxes, and even rent a bike anywhere in Europe using one app, a universal passport for the digital world. The UN calls it the key to sustainable development because it brings everyone into the system. On the surface, it all sounds innocent. But in reality, it's anything but. Because the same features that make it so convenient are also the ones that can be used for control. Once you centralize every person's identity into one system, you make it easier to prove who you are, but also easier for governments, corporations, and special interests to track and control you. We've already seen examples of governments weaponizing financial access against citizens. And this is only going to intensify in 3 specific ways. Government power. Corporate power. Surveillance. Let's start with the first one, government power. If you remember the Freedom Convoy protests in Canada back in 2022, The government used emergency powers to order banks to freeze the accounts of people involved in those demonstrations. We're not just talking about protest organizers, even ordinary citizens who donated money through GoFundMe were affected. Overnight, people found themselves locked out of their own savings, no trial, no court order, no conviction. Their only crime was supporting the wrong cause. A similar case happened earlier this year in Georgia, where Amnesty International reported that the government froze the bank accounts of NGOs and lawyers providing legal aid to protesters. Their offense? Helping citizens exercise their right to protest. With just a few clicks, the government was able to silence opposition by cutting off financial access, and all of it was done legally. Under anti-money laundering laws, banks are required to freeze or flag accounts that show suspicious activity. But that raises a serious question. What exactly counts as suspicious? And who gets to decide that? It could mean transferring money to buy Bitcoin. It could mean donating to a protest movement. It could even mean boycotting a company the government wants to protect. None of these acts have to be proven illegal in court. As long as they're considered suspicious, that's enough reason to lock you out of your own funds. And that's a very scary precedent. Now let's move to the second area of concern, corporate power. Big corporations like Amazon and Uber are already experimenting with digital ID systems. And once these become the standard, digital IDs won't just serve as identification. They'll become what some experts call a super cookie. Think of how websites use cookies to track your browsing history and target you with ads. Now imagine that concept applied to your entire digital identity. That opens the door to something called dynamic pricing, a dream come true for shareholders. Here's how it works. Think about airports charging $20 for a sandwich or a bottle of water. Why? Because they know you're trapped, you won't leave the airport, go through security again, and come back. You're stuck, and they can charge more simply because you don't have a choice. That's basic dynamic pricing. Now imagine that logic supercharged by digital ID data. Let's say your ID app shows that you've just completed a 10-hour flight. The system knows where you've been, how tired you are, and what's in your digital wallet. So, the algorithm concludes, you're stressed, hungry, and willing to pay more. Suddenly, that same sandwich costs $25 instead of $12. Meanwhile, the person sitting next to you pays less because the system determined they're more price-sensitive, willing to pay $15 but not $1 more. Platforms like Ticketmaster already use dynamic pricing, where ticket prices fluctuate by the minute depending on demand. Now imagine if your digital ID shows that you've searched for Taylor Swift tickets 5 times this week. The system knows you're eager, so your price gets bumped higher than someone else's. Airlines already do similar things with flight tickets. Or take car insurance. Right now, companies use broad risk categories. But with digital ID, insurers could access your exact driving history, Uber ride logs, and locations you visit frequently, all tracked in real time. You wouldn't get to negotiate any of this, because the system already knows everything about you. That's the danger of corporate power. And now comes the third, and maybe most alarming, part, surveillance and security. Some digital driver's license apps in the US already include a hidden function called a phone home feature. That means every time you scan your ID at a bar, an airport, or a hotel, the app pings a government database. So instead of being just a harmless ID, the government now has a time-stamped record of your every move, where you go, and when you go there, in real time. Combine that with Central Bank Digital Currencies, CBDCs, which are already being tested, and you can see how dangerous this could become. If an API allows companies or government agencies to interact with your digital ID and currency, we could soon have programmable money tied directly to your biometric identity. That means the government could restrict how or where you spend your money, or even set expiration dates on it, all with a few lines of code. The amount of control this creates is unimaginable. But it doesn't end there, because there's also the risk of data breaches. India's Aadhaar system, the world's largest digital ID program, has already suffered multiple data leaks. Personal details and biometric data of over 1 billion people were exposed. And here's the terrifying part. If your fingerprint, facial scan, or iris data is compromised, you can't just reset it like a password. Once it's leaked, it's gone forever. If the purpose of digital IDs is truly to protect us from fraud or illegal immigration, then the systems we already have should be enough. But clearly, they aren't working, and adding another layer of control won't fix that problem. Exactly, if existing credentials aren't enforced, how will a digital ID change that? Even government officials struggle to give a solid answer, because there isn't one. If we allow this to continue, it will fundamentally alter the balance of power between citizens, governments, and corporations, and not in our favor. Sure, it'll make things more convenient, but only as long as you never step out of line or say something the system doesn't approve of. All a digital ID will do is give governments total control over what we do, what we buy, and where we go. We saw the same thing during the pandemic. Vaccine IDs didn't stop the spread, they only made life harder for everyone. And they're right, these massive databases can be hacked, exploited, or misused by foreign actors or corporations. The truth is, there's no real benefit to governments having this much access to personal data, except one: control. That's the world we're heading into, and honestly, the older I get, the more I start sounding like that paranoid uncle at family gatherings. But maybe, just maybe, this is one of those times where paranoia might save us. So what do you think about this system? Is it progress, or a step toward total surveillance? Let me know in the comments. As always, I hope you have an amazing day. Smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, bye bye.